No one noticed the man sitting beside Ava. That was the strangest part. As the laughter spread through the fundraiser, as phones lifted and jokes flew, he remained in his seat, calm, unreadable, dressed plainly compared to the others. Aaliyah Ashford didn't even glance at him. She was too busy pointing at Ava. "You see this?" she said loudly. "This is what happens when standards disappear. Who lets someone like her watch children?" Laughter followed, sharp, cruel. Ava's face burned. She stared at the floor. The man beside her didn't move. Aaliyah stepped closer. "Don't worry," she added, smiling. "We'll make sure you're gone before dessert." Then Ava's phone vibrated. Once. The man beside her finally stood. Not fast, not angry. He picked up a napkin, wiped the spilled champagne from Ava's sleeve, and spoke softly. "She's not leaving." Aaliyah laughed. "And you are?" He looked at her, almost curious. "The reason," he said, "your husband hasn't slept in 3 nights." The room didn't go quiet yet, but Aaliyah's face did. Then he turned to Ava. "Come," he said gently. "You don't kneel here." That was when people started checking their phones and realized who they had been laughing in front of. And the video Ava had been quietly recording that night was already uploading. Before the story continues, let me say this. If you are still here right now, it means this story touched you. And love and tension is please subscribe. It's free, but it means everything to this channel. Now, let's continue. The autumn rain in Riverside District was less of a drizzle and more of a deliberate assault, each drop hitting the pavement with the weight of a small stone, the kind of rain that found every hole in your shoes, every weak seam in your jacket, every crack in your resolve. Ava Brooke trudged up Lexington Avenue at 6:47 p.m., her second shift at Magnolia Estates finally finished. Her feet screamed inside discount sneakers that had given up their structural integrity 2 months ago. Her lower back throbbed with the particular ache that came from scrubbing bathroom tiles on your knees for 6 hours straight. The canvas bag slung over her shoulder, purchased from a thrift store for $3, carried her entire work life: 2 spare uniforms, a Tupperware container that once held her lunch, and a phone so old it couldn't run half the apps her clients used to communicate. Tired enough that she'd stopped noticing the reflection in store windows. Tired enough that she'd stopped making eye contact with anyone. Tired enough that the person she had been 5 years ago, the woman who'd dreamed of opening her own daycare center, who'd taken early childhood education courses at community college, who believed in plans and futures, felt like a fictional character from someone else's story. Ava had long since scaled back those ambitious dreams to simple goals: keep the electricity on, keep her landlord from knocking, keep her shoes held together with duct tape for 1 more month. She turned on Morrison Street, where the street lights worked only intermittently and the sidewalk was more crater than concrete. Her apartment was still 3 blocks away. 3 blocks felt like 3 miles. Then she heard it, a sound that didn't belong. Ava stopped. Almost missed it entirely, but her senses, honed by years of watching other people's children, caught the subtle wrongness in the air, the shift in the evening's rhythm, a whimper, soft, terrified, coming from the narrow alley between the closed pharmacy and the shuttered laundromat. Every survival instinct screamed, "Walk away." This neighborhood didn't reward curiosity. People who investigated strange sounds in dark alleys became cautionary tales. Ava had exactly $47 in her checking account and couldn't afford to become anyone's stationary. But the whimper came again, smaller this time, more desperate. Ava's feet moved before her brain approved the decision. The alley smelled like standing water and rotting cardboard. The single overhead light had been shot out weeks ago, but Ava's eyes adjusted quickly, scanning the darkness with practiced efficiency. That's when she saw him. A child who couldn't have been more than 6 years old was a portrait of misplaced wealth and utter terror. He wore what had once been an expensive outfit. Ava recognized the label on the small jacket, the kind that cost more than her monthly rent, but it was torn, muddy, soaked through. His face was streaked with tears and dirt. His small hands clutched something to his chest. He was shivering, violently. His lips had gone pale. Ava worked quickly, her movements precise despite the mounting panic in her chest. She stripped off her own jacket, threadbare but dry on the inside, and wrapped it around the child's shoulders, knelt in the filthy alley water without hesitation, pressed her palm to his forehead, burning hot. Fever, then. How long had he been here? The boy didn't speak, just stared at her with dark, frightened eyes. "Hey, baby," Ava said softly, using the voice she reserved for scared children. "My name is Ava. You're safe now. Can you tell me your name?" "Nothing." "Okay, that's okay. We don't have to talk yet." She scooped him up. He weighed almost nothing, and moved. Her apartment was closer than any hospital, and something told her that calling 911 might be the wrong move here. Some instinct, cultivated through years of navigating systems that didn't always protect the vulnerable, warned her that this child's situation was more complicated than it appeared. Her efficiency apartment on the 4th floor was exactly as she had left it, cramped, clean, depressing. A single room that served as bedroom, living room, and kitchen, a bathroom the size of a closet, furniture from 3 different decades, none of it matching, all of it functional. But it was warm, and it was safe. Ava worked methodically, stripped the child of his wet clothes, wrapped him in her only good blanket, a fleece throw her sister had given her 2 Christmases ago, heated water on her ancient electric stove, found chamomile tea in the back of her cupboard, mixed it with honey, forced small sips between the boy's trembling lips. Small sips, that's good, that's so good. She checked him over with trained eyes. No obvious injuries, no bruises, no signs of physical abuse, just cold, wet, terrified. The child clutched something in his right hand, something he wouldn't let go of even as he began to warm, even as his shivering subsided. A phone case, expensive, heavy-duty, the kind with military-grade protection. Ava gently worked it from his grip. He whimpered but didn't fight her. The case was pristine despite everything else being ruined. Waterproof, she realized, and inside, a phone, powered off but intact. She turned it over. Stuck to the back was a small label, the kind parents put on their children's belongings, written in careful, childish handwriting. Property of G. Ho Park. If found, call Appa. Below it, a phone number. Ava's stomach dropped. The area code was local, but that wasn't what made her hand start shaking. It was the careful way the label had been applied, the protective case, the expensive phone given to a child this young, the designer clothes now ruined, and most of all, the fact that someone had discarded this child in an alley like garbage, but that child had held onto this phone like his life depended on it. Because maybe it did. Ava sat back on her heels, staring at the phone in her palm. The name Park resonated in Riverside District's undercurrents. Not loudly, not obviously, but like a bass note that vibrated in your chest even when you couldn't quite hear it. Junho Park. The name was spoken in hushed tones and careful contexts. Ava had heard the whispers, the warnings, the stories that people told in fragments, never completing the full picture, because completing it felt dangerous. What she knew, Junho Park had arrived in Riverside 10 years ago from Seoul. He'd started with a single restaurant in Koreatown. Now he owned half the commercial real estate in 3 districts. His businesses were everywhere: restaurants, nightclubs, import companies, construction firms, all legitimate on paper, all generating the kind of wealth that made city councilmen take his calls. But everyone knew, everyone understood. He controlled everything from produce distribution to waste management. He settled disputes that the police couldn't touch. He made problems disappear. People who crossed him found their businesses foreclosed, their reputations destroyed, their families suddenly very interested in relocating to other cities. Junho Park was known for his mathematical precision and absolute control, for running his empire with the efficiency of a Fortune 500 company and the ruthlessness of someone who understood that mercy was weakness. He was, in short, a man you didn't cross, a man you didn't notice, a man whose attention you never, ever wanted. And Ava was holding his son's phone. She looked at the child, Jiho, now sleeping fitfully on her couch, wrapped in her blanket. His fever had broken. His breathing had steadied. He looked so small, so fragile. Ava had a choice. She could call the police, report a found child, let the system handle it. But the system was slow, bureaucratic, and this child belonged to someone powerful, someone who wouldn't take kindly to official intervention, someone who might see police involvement as a threat, Or she could call the number on the label, thrust herself directly into the path of a man who terrified everyone who knew his name. Her hand was shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. She pressed her other palm flat against her thigh, took 3 deep breaths, found the deep well of stubborn courage she'd kept hidden since the day her world had fallen apart. This was a child, a scared, lost child who needed his father. That was the only thing that mattered. Ava powered on the phone. The lock screen showed a photo. Jiho, younger, laughing, held in the arms of a man whose face was turned away from the camera. The background was expensive. A penthouse view, floor-to-ceiling windows. She navigated to the emergency contact. Only one number listed. Appa. Ava pressed dial. It rang once. Jiho. The voice that answered was sharp, controlled, but she could hear the fracture beneath it, the crack of terror being held together by willpower alone. "This isn't Jiho," Ava said, keeping her voice steady. "My name is Ava Brooke. I don't have long, so listen carefully. I found your son approximately 43 minutes ago in an alley on Morrison Street between Oak and Lexington. He's safe. He's in my apartment. He's scared but unharmed. I think he has a mild fever, but I've warmed him up and given him fluids." Silence. Absolute, paralyzing silence. Ava could hear her own blood rushing in her ears, could hear Jiho's soft breathing, could hear the rain still falling outside. "Repeat your name." The voice changed, polished veneer stripped away, revealing something raw underneath. "Ava Brooke." "Repeat the location." "Morrison Street, between Oak and Lexington. 4th floor walk-up, apartment 4C, building with the green door." "How did you—" The voice cut off. She heard him breathing, heard the sound of movement. Then, "Why didn't you call the police?" "Because," Ava said carefully, "I know who you are, and I know that your son being found by police would create problems you don't need. I worked as a childcare provider for 7 years. I know how to care for children. Your son is safe, and I'm calling you directly because that seemed like the fastest way to get him home." Another beat of silence. "You knew who I was, and you called anyway." It wasn't a question. "He's a little boy," Ava said simply. "He's scared. He wants his father. That's all that matters." She heard something that might have been a sharp exhale, might have been a laugh, might have been something else entirely. "Don't move. Don't let him leave your sight. I'm coming." "How long?" 12 minutes. The line went dead. Ava sat in the dim light of her apartment, phone still pressed to her ear, and realized she'd gambled her entire life on a single bet, that a man known for ruthlessness might also be a father who loved his son. 12 minutes felt like 12 hours. The sound reached her first, not sirens, nothing so obvious, but at 7:23 p.m., exactly 12 minutes after the phone call ended, Ava heard the change in the street's rhythm, the sudden silence of other cars, the way ambient noise seemed to retreat. Then, the deep rumble of multiple high-performance engines. Ava moved to her single window, careful not to disturb Jiho, and looked down. 4 black SUVs had arrived simultaneously, blocking both ends of Morrison Street with military precision. Not the kind of SUVs you bought at dealerships. Custom, modified, the kind with reinforced doors and windows that didn't shatter. Doors opened in unison. Men emerged. 12 of them, moving with synchronized efficiency, fanning out to secure the perimeter. 2 remained by each vehicle. 4 moved to the building's entrance. 2 took positions on the street. No flashing lights, no drawn weapons, but the message was clear. This building now belonged to someone else. Ava heard footsteps in the stairwell, multiple sets, moving fast but controlled. Her door was the original from 1987, thin and hollow. It wouldn't stop anyone who wanted in. She'd never bothered to feel afraid of that before. She had nothing worth stealing. Now, standing between that door and a sleeping 6-year-old, she realized how vulnerable she actually was. The footsteps stopped outside her door. A pause. Then a knock. 3 times. Not aggressive. Almost polite. Ava checked Jiho, still sleeping, and crossed to the door. Opened it. 6 men stood in her narrow hallway, filling the space completely. Professional. Alert. Their eyes scanned her apartment in seconds, cataloging every corner, every potential threat, every exit. The one in front met her gaze. "Miss Brooke." "Yes?" "We need to secure the location before Mr. Park enters. May we?" It wasn't really a question, but Ava appreciated the pretense. "The child is sleeping on the couch," she said. Don't wake him. They moved past her, efficient. 2 checked her bathroom and single closet, cleared both in seconds. 2 examined the windows, the fire escape. 2 remained by the door. The sweep took less than 30 seconds. Clear, one said quietly into a small radio. Then he entered. Jun-ho Park was nothing like the stereotypical crime boss from movies and television shows. He didn't swagger, didn't posture, didn't announce himself. He simply walked into her apartment, dressed in a charcoal wool overcoat over a simple dark suit, perfectly tailored, expensive without being flashy, and the entire room's gravity shifted. His presence was not defined by volume or aggression, but by the absolute certainty that he was the most dangerous person in any space he occupied. He was younger than Ava expected, perhaps mid-30s. His face was sharp, controlled, unremarkable in its features, but remarkable in its stillness. His eyes swept the apartment once, cataloging everything, missing nothing. Then he saw Ji-ho. For a single fleeting second, Ava saw the mask crack, revealing something raw and terrified and utterly human underneath. Then the moment passed. Jun-ho moved to the couch, knelt beside his son, placed one hand on Ji-ho's forehead, checking his temperature with a parent's practiced touch, traced his thumb along the child's cheek. His other hand gripped Ji-ho's small hand. "Appa is here," he whispered in Korean, so soft Ava almost missed it. Ji-ho stirred, his eyes opened, unfocused at first, then sharpening with recognition. "Appa!" "Shh, I'm here. You're safe." The child lunged into his father's arms and Jun-ho held him, just held him. His eyes closed. His shoulders, which had been rigid with control, sagged slightly. One of the men stepped forward with a medical bag. Jun-ho didn't let go of Ji-ho, but shifted enough to allow the examination. The man worked quickly. Thermometer, flashlight checking pupils, stethoscope listening to lungs and heart. Mild fever, already breaking. No signs of trauma or injury. He's dehydrated but stable. Someone took good care of him. Jun-ho looked at Ava for the first time since entering. His eyes were empty of emotion, calculating, measuring her. "You said you were a child care provider." "For 7 years," Ava confirmed. "I have certifications in first aid and early childhood development. I lost my position 8 months ago when the center I worked for closed. I've been working cleaning jobs since then." "Why Morrison Street?" "It's where I live." "You found him in an alley." "Yes." "You didn't call police?" "No." "Why?" I met his gaze steadily. "Because I recognized the phone case, the clothes, the label with your name. I knew that involving police would complicate a situation that needed to be simple. A child needed his father, so I called you directly. You gambled your life on that call. I gambled my life on you loving your son more than you value control." Ava corrected. It seemed like a reasonable bet. Something flickered in Jun-ho's eyes. Might have been amusement, might have been respect, might have been calculation. He turned to one of his men. "Secure the building. No one enters or leaves without my approval. Contact building ownership. I want this entire structure purchased by tomorrow morning. Contact the landlord. Ensure Miss Brooks' rent is resolved. Contact—" "Stop," Ava said. Everyone in the room froze. "I don't want your money," Ava continued. "I didn't do this for a reward. I did it because a child needed help. That's all." Jun-ho studied her. "Everyone wants something." "Then I want you to take your son home and make sure he's safe. That's what I want." The silence stretched between them like a living thing. "Ji-ho was taken from his school," Jun-ho said finally. "Abducted by someone who believed they could use him against me. A business rival who underestimated how quickly I respond to threats. We tracked the vehicle to this district, but they'd transferred him to a second car. My men searched for 3 hours. He looked at his son, still clinging to him. The abductor realized they'd made a mistake, realized what I would do to them. So they panicked, discarded Ji-ho in an alley and ran. We found the abductor 40 minutes ago. They are no longer a concern." The way he said it made Ava's blood run cold. "But they had 3 hours with my son," Jun-ho continued. 3 hours where Ji-ho was terrified, alone, in danger. And in that time, One person did what was right. One person chose to help instead of walk away. One person risked everything to call a man she feared because a child mattered more than her own safety. He stood, still holding Jiho. "That," he said quietly, "is worth more than money." "Then we're square," Ava said. "You have your son, I have peace of mind. We're done." "No," Junho said. "We're not." He handed Jiho to one of his men. The child protested softly but obeyed, and turned his full attention to Ava. "You took a risk that no one else in this city would have taken. You showed judgment, compassion, and competence under pressure. You cared for my son when I couldn't. That creates a debt, Miss Brooke, and I always repay my debts. I told you I don't want—" "And since you refuse money," Junho interrupted, "I will repay you in two ways. First, by removing the risk you pose to yourself." He gestured to the apartment. "This building is now mine. Your rent is eliminated. The landlord will not bother you. The utilities will not be shut off. You will not worry about where you sleep or whether you can afford heat. I can't accept—" "Second," he continued as if she hadn't spoken, "I will utilize your unique quality. You are a trained childcare provider. You recognized danger and acted. You asked no questions, made no demands, sought no advantage. That combination is extraordinarily rare." Junho took a step closer. His voice dropped, becoming almost conversational. "I have enemies, Miss Brooke. People who would use my son to hurt me. People who watch, who wait for opportunities. I need someone watching him who thinks like you did tonight. Someone whose first instinct is protection, not profit. Someone who can't be bought, can't be threatened, because they operate from principle." He paused. "You will become Jiho's primary caretaker. Not his nanny, I have staff for that, but the person who is present when I cannot be, who attends his school events, who knows his schedule, who would, if necessary, make the hard calls that keep him safe. I'm not qualified to—" "You saved my son's life tonight," Junho said flatly. "You are the only person qualified." Ava felt the weight of the room pressing down on her. Every man watching, every exit covered, the reality of the situation crystallizing with brutal clarity. "This isn't a request," she said slowly. "No, it's a debt being repaid. Your life was struggling, unstable, uncertain. I'm offering you stability, safety, and purpose. In exchange, you will have one other duty, a debt of honor." Junho's expression didn't change, but his voice carried absolute certainty. "You proved tonight that you have integrity in a world where it's negotiable. That is rare in my world, Miss Brooke. That is the only thing of true value that you possess, and I am claiming it." He moved to the window, looking down at the street where his vehicles waited. "Tomorrow morning, representatives will arrive with paperwork. You will receive a formal contract, identification credentials, and access to resources. You will be compensated appropriately, not as payment for tonight, but as salary for your new position. You will also receive a phone. That phone will have one number programmed. If Jiho is ever in danger, you call it. If you see anything concerning, you call it. If you need anything to do your job effectively, you call it." "And if I refuse?" asked Ava, already knowing the answer. Junho turned back to her. His expression was neutral, but she saw the calculation in his eyes. "You won't, because you understand that you're now connected to something larger than yourself, because you made a choice tonight that revealed your character, because somewhere in the past 3 hours you stopped being a stranger and became someone who matters to my son." He gestured to Jiho, now sleeping again in his guard's arms. "He will remember you, the woman who found him, who warmed him, who called his father. Children don't forget kindness, Miss Brooke, and neither do I." Junho moved toward the door. His men fell into formation around him. At the threshold, he paused. "You are no longer a cleaning woman working 2 shifts. You are now Jiho Park's guardian, and that title carries weight in this city. Your life is no longer entirely yours, but it will be secure. You will never struggle for rent, for food, for basic dignity again. This is my repayment." "Debts can be paid and finished," Ava said. "This sounds like a chain." Junho's expression didn't change, but she thought she saw the ghost of something, respect perhaps in his eyes. All significant debts become chains, Miss Brooke. The question is whether the chain binds you or elevates you. I suspect, given your character, it will be the latter. He left. His men followed. The door closed with a soft click, and Ava stood in her tiny apartment, which was apparently no longer hers, not really, staring at the evidence of how completely her life had transformed in the span of 3 hours. On her kitchen counter, a business card Junho had left behind, heavy stock paper, embossed lettering, a single phone number. On her couch, the blanket that had warmed a terrified child, now abandoned. In her mind, the absolute certainty that she had traded her quiet, struggling existence for something infinitely more complicated. She'd gambled her life on a scared child's needs, and she'd won everything except her freedom. The representatives arrived at 8 a.m. precisely. Ava slept maybe 2 hours, her mind too wired to fully rest. She expected lawyers, maybe security personnel. Instead, 3 women arrived. Professional, efficient, carrying leather portfolios and warm smiles that somehow felt genuine. The lead introduced herself as Min Ji, Junho's executive assistant. She set up a laptop on Ava's small kitchen table and began walking through contracts with practiced ease. Your official title will be Family Liaison Specialist. Your primary responsibility is Jiho Park's well-being and safety. You'll coordinate with his school, attend important events, and serve as primary contact for emergencies. She pulled up a calendar on her laptop. Jiho attends Riverside Academy Prep. School starts at 8 a.m., ends at 3 p.m. He has piano on Tuesdays and Thursdays, taekwondo on Wednesdays and Fridays. You'll need to be available for pickup when Mr. Park cannot be present, which is most days. Ava listened, her head spinning. What about my current jobs? Terminated as of this morning, with appropriate compensation, of course. Minji slid a check across the table. The amount made Ava's stomach drop. More money than she'd seen in a year. Your new salary will be deposited bi-weekly. Minji showed her the figure. Ava stared at the number. It was more than triple what she was making combined from both jobs. It was the kind of salary that meant security, savings, choices. It was the kind of salary that made it impossible to walk away. The second woman, introduced as Hana, handled logistics. A new phone, encrypted, according to her explanation, a security badge for Riverside Academy, keys to a modest but reliable sedan, purchased in Ava's name. The car is necessary for transport. It's equipped with GPS and a direct emergency line. Press the red button on the dashboard if there's ever a problem. The third woman, Soo Jin, handled wardrobe. You'll be attending various events with the family, she explained, taking Ava's measurements with practiced efficiency. School functions, some business dinners where children are present, occasional public appearances. Nothing theatrical, but you'll need appropriate attire. We'll have selections delivered by Friday. Ava felt like she was watching someone else's life unfold. What if I make a mistake? She asked finally. What if something goes wrong? Minji looked up from her laptop. Her expression softened slightly. Mr. Park doesn't expect perfection. He expects the same judgment you showed last night. Trust your instincts. Prioritize Jiho's safety and well-being above all else. If you're uncertain, call. Someone will always answer. She closed her laptop. Miss Brooke, I'll be direct. Mr. Park's world is complicated and sometimes dangerous, but his love for his son is absolute. You earned his trust last night. Not his money, his trust. That is remarkably rare in my world, Miss Brooke. That is the only thing of true value that you possess, and I am claiming it. They left by 9:30 a.m., leaving behind contracts, credentials, technology, and a stack of information that would take Ava days to fully process. She stood in her apartment, which looked exactly the same as yesterday, but somehow felt completely different, and wondered if she'd made a deal with the devil or just found the safety net she'd been falling toward for 8 months. The first meeting with Jiho happened 3 days later. Ava arrived at Junho's residence, a penthouse that occupied the top 2 floors of the Meridian Tower downtown, at 4 p.m. exactly as requested. A private elevator, a security guard who checked her credentials, made a phone call, nodded her through. The doors opened directly into a living space that redefined wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. Furniture that looked like art installations. Everything clean, modern, expensive in the way that whispered rather than shouted. "You're welcome, though I'm not sure I had much choice." A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "You're direct. I appreciate that." Jiho sat on an oversized couch, building something with expensive-looking blocks. He looked up when Ava entered, and she saw recognition flash across his small face. "This is Miss Ava," Junho said in Korean, then switched to English. "She's the woman who helped you. Do you remember?" Jiho nodded slowly. "She gave me tea and her blanket." "That's right." Junho moved to sit beside his son. "Miss Ava is going to be spending time with you from now on. She'll pick you up from school sometimes, attend your piano recitals, maybe help with homework. Like a nanny? Like a friend who cares about keeping you safe," Junho corrected gently. Jiho studied Ava with the particular intensity children have, unfiltered and honest. "Are you scared of Appa?" "Jiho," Junho said quietly, a warning. But Ava answered honestly, "A little. Your father is a powerful man, and powerful people can be intimidating, but I think he loves you very much, and that matters more than being scared." Jiho considered this. Then, "Do you like dinosaurs?" The shift was so sudden Ava almost laughed. "I do. I have 73 dinosaur figures. Want to see?" "I would love to." For the next hour, Ava sat on an expensive carpet worth more than her yearly salary had been, learning the names of dinosaurs from a 6-year-old who spoke 3 languages and had opinions about paleontology periods. Junho watched from across the room, making occasional phone calls, reviewing documents, but never fully disengaging, always present, always monitoring. When it was time to leave, Junho walked Ava to the elevator. "You're good with him," he observed. "He's a good kid. Smart, sweet. He's been having nightmares since the abduction. Wakes up crying, doesn't want to go to school." Junho's expression remained neutral, but Ava heard the crack in his voice, the helplessness that even power and money couldn't fix. "That's normal," Ava said gently. "Trauma takes time, but children are resilient, especially when they feel safe. Just keep being present, keep being consistent. He'll heal. And if he doesn't, then we get him professional help. There's no shame in that." Junho nodded slowly. "Thank you, Miss Brooke." "Ava, please. Miss Brooke makes me feel like a teacher." "Ava, then." He extended his hand. "Welcome to our world." She shook it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the controlled strength in his grip, and realized she'd just crossed a threshold that couldn't be uncrossed. 6 weeks passed. Ava settled into her new role with the same practical efficiency she'd applied to everything else in her life. She learned Jiho's routines, his preferences, his fears. She showed up on time, made herself useful without being intrusive, kept her observations sharp and her reports concise. She also began noticing things, the way certain people reacted when they learned she worked for Junho Park, the immediate respect tinged with caution, the way conversations would pause when she entered school pickup areas, then resume with forced casualness. The whisper network at Riverside Academy Prep was sophisticated and vicious. Wealthy parents who'd built entire identities around their children's achievements, their social positioning, their carefully curated lives. And then there was Ava, black, visibly plus-sized in a world obsessed with thinness, working class in designer clothes that never quite fit right because Soo-jin could only do so much with alterations, walking into spaces where she clearly didn't belong, collecting a child who happened to be the son of the most dangerous man in the city. The first few weeks, people were cautious, polite, uncertain how to classify her, but by week 4, someone had done the research, found her LinkedIn profile from when she'd been job hunting, discovered she'd worked as a custodian, cleaning toilets at Magnolia Estates. The shift was immediate. Polite distance became cold shoulders, friendly waves became turned backs. The careful hierarchy of wealthy parents reasserted itself, and Ava was firmly placed at the bottom. She'd expected it, had lived through worse. So she smiled, picked up Jiho, and went home. But she noticed, and she remembered. The lead architect of Ava's social ostracization was Aaliyah Ashford. Tall, elegant, perpetually dressed like she was heading to a magazine photo shoot, married to Marcus Ashford, some kind of tech entrepreneur who'd made millions in cryptocurrency, president of the Riverside Academy Parent Association, self-appointed queen of the school's social hierarchy. Aaliyah had made it her personal mission to ensure everyone knew their place, and Ava's place, according to Aaliyah, was nowhere near the rest of them. "I heard," Aaliyah announced loudly one afternoon during pickup, "that Junho Park hired a former cleaning woman to watch his child. Can you imagine? I suppose when you make money through questionable means, you don't really understand proper childcare standards." Laughter from her circle, pointed looks at Ava. Ava kept her expression neutral, held Jiho's hand, and walked to her car. "Why do those ladies always laugh when they look at you?" Jiho asked as she buckled him in. "Some people laugh when they're uncomfortable," Ava said carefully. "It doesn't mean anything important. Appa says people who need to make others feel small are already small inside." Ava smiled despite herself. "Your Appa is a wise man." But the incidents accumulated. Aaliyah's accidentally excluding Ava from parent group texts about schedule changes, other parents whispering and falling silent when Ava approached, one particularly bold mother asking loudly if Junho Park had hired help from one of those agencies that doesn't do background checks. Ava reported none of it to Junho. This wasn't danger, this was just everyday cruelty, and she'd survived worse. But she kept a mental tally. And she started carrying her phone everywhere, her record app always one swipe away. The Riverside Academy annual fundraiser was the social event of the fall season, black tie, held at the Grandview Hotel's ballroom, $500 a plate with proceeds going to the school's scholarship fund. Junho received an invitation. As a major donor, he'd quietly funded an entire new science lab. His attendance was expected. "I need you to attend with us," Junho told Ava during one of their weekly coordination meetings. "Jiho will be there. Some parents bring their children. He'll need familiar support." "I'm not sure that's appropriate," Ava said carefully. "The other parents already—" "I know what the other parents think," Junho interrupted. His tone was flat, dangerous. "I know every word they've said about you, every look, every exclusion." Ava's stomach dropped. "You've been monitoring?" "I monitor everything that concerns my son, and you concern my son." Junho's expression didn't change. "The question is whether their behavior has compromised your ability to do your job. It hasn't."
"Then you'll attend. Wear something formal. Sujin will coordinate." It wasn't a request. The dress Sujin selected was beautiful. Deep burgundy, expertly tailored, elegant without being flashy. Ava barely recognized herself in the mirror. But she also knew that no amount of expensive fabric would change how people saw her. The Grandview Hotel ballroom was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers, white orchid centerpieces, a string quartet playing softly, 200 parents in designer formal wear, sipping champagne, networking with a particular intensity of people for whom every conversation was transactional. Junho entered with Jiho and Ava. The room's attention shifted immediately. Not obviously, but definitively. Conversations continued, but eyes tracked Junho's movement. He looked devastating in a perfectly cut tuxedo, his presence commanding without effort. Jiho, in a small suit that matched his father's, held Ava's hand on one side and his father's on the other. They were seated at a prime table near the front. Junho had donated enough to earn premier placement. Aaliyah Ashford was 3 tables away. Ava watched her notice them, watched her expression shift from surprise to calculation to poorly concealed disdain. The dinner progressed. Speeches from the headmaster, the board president, various donors. Ava focused on Jiho, making sure he ate, keeping him entertained with quiet jokes and small observations. Junho was called to the stage to accept recognition for his donation. He gave a brief, gracious speech about believing in education and investing in the community's future. The applause was enthusiastic, but cautious, everyone clapping for the money while trying not to think too hard about where it came from. When Junho returned to his seat, Aaliyah chose her moment. She stood, champagne glass in hand, and approached their table with a particular confidence of someone who believed she was untouchable. "Junho," she said warmly, as if they were friends. Wonderful speech. The school is so grateful for your generosity. Thank you, Mrs. Ashford. I hope you're enjoying the evening. Her eyes slid to Ava, and her smile sharpened. I see you brought your staff. How progressive. Ava kept her expression neutral. Junho's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. I brought Jiho's guardian, someone I trust completely with the most important person in my life. Oh, of course. Aaliyah's tone dripped false sweetness. It's just that usually we reserve these events for parents and family. Staff typically wait outside or in the lobby, but I suppose different people have different standards. She'd said it loud enough that nearby tables heard, conversations paused, heads turned. Perhaps, Aaliyah continued, emboldened by her audience, you didn't realize. These fundraisers are really about the community coming together. People who share certain values, certain backgrounds. We wouldn't want anyone to feel out of place. Her eyes were on Ava now, making very clear whom she meant. See this? Aaliyah said, gesturing toward Ava with her champagne glass. The alcohol had loosened her tongue, made her cruel. This is what happens when standards disappear. Who lets someone like her watch children? I mean, really, someone who used to clean toilets? Laughter rippled through nearby tables. Not everyone. Some people looked uncomfortable. But enough. Enough phones were lifting, enough smirks spreading. Ava's face burned. She stared at the floor, her hands clenched in her lap beneath the table. Junho remained absolutely still beside her. Then Ava's phone vibrated. Once. A message from Minji. Recording active. Keep phone on table. Camera facing forward. Ava's heart hammered. She hadn't even noticed that Junho had sent the signal. Junho finally stood. Not fast, not angry. He picked up a napkin, wiped the few drops of champagne that had splashed on Ava's sleeve during Aaliyah's gesturing, and spoke softly. She's not leaving. Aaliyah laughed. The sound was sharp, performative. And you are? Junho looked at her with something like curiosity, the way someone might observe an interesting insect. The reason, he said quietly, your husband hasn't slept in 3 nights. The laughter around them didn't stop yet, but Aaliyah's expression froze. Junho turned to Ava, his voice gentled. Come, he said. You don't kneel here. He offered his hand. Ava took it, stood on shaking legs. That was when people started checking their phones. Because Junho Park wasn't just wealthy, wasn't just powerful. He was the man who controlled half the city's commercial real estate, including the building where Marcus Ashford's company was headquartered. He was the man whose import businesses supplied 3/4 of the specialty goods that Riverside District's restaurants depended on. He was the man whose construction companies had built half the luxury developments these people lived in. And somewhere in the room, had finally done the research that Aaliyah apparently hadn't bothered with. Ava watched the color drain from Aaliyah's face as someone whispered in her ear, watched her fumble for her own phone, watched her expression shift from smug superiority to growing horror. But Junho wasn't done. Mrs. Ashford, he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the now silent table, I appreciate your concern for community standards, shared values, appropriate backgrounds. He paused. Miss Brooke holds a bachelor's degree in early childhood education. She's certified in pediatric CPR, first aid, and child development. She worked 7 years at Horizon Learning Center, where she was voted Teacher of the Year twice. She lost that position when the center closed due to funding cuts, not performance issues. Each fact landed like a hammer blow. Then, when she couldn't find work in her field, she took 2 jobs to pay rent. Cleaning offices at night, serving food during the day. She did this with dignity, without complaint, without compromising her integrity. Junho's tone never changed, never rose, but the entire ballroom was listening now. Then, when she found my son, cold, terrified, abandoned in an alley, she didn't hesitate. She didn't calculate advantage. She didn't see an opportunity. She saw a child who needed help, and she helped him. She called me directly, despite knowing who I am and what I'm capable of, because getting Jiho home safely mattered more than her own fear. He looked at Aaliyah. That is character, Mrs. Ashford. That is the standard I hold for people who matter to my family, and Miss Brooke meets it in ways that I suspect you cannot comprehend." The silence was absolute. "Now," continued Junho, "I believe you mentioned ensuring Miss Brooke leaves before dessert. Allow me to clarify something." He gestured towards the ballroom. "This hotel, I own the building. The Grandview Corporation sold it to me 6 months ago. The staff here work for me. The food you're eating was supplied by my import companies. The chairs you're sitting on were manufactured by companies I have controlling interest in." Aaliyah had gone pale. "So, when you suggest that someone should leave my property, Mrs. Ashford, I have to wonder, which of us do you think lacks the authority to be here?"
Junho turned to Ava. "Would you like to stay for dessert?" Ava found her voice, stronger than she expected. "Yes, I would." "Then we'll stay." He sat back down. Ava followed. Jiho, who'd been watching everything with wide eyes, whispered, "Appa is scary when he's being nice." "Yes," Ava whispered back. "Yes, he is." Aaliyah retreated to her table. Around the room, people had their phones out now, furiously Googling, whispering, reassessing everything. The dinner resumed, but the power dynamic had shifted permanently. What Aaliyah Ashford and her circle of social elites didn't know was that Ava had been recording, not just tonight, but for weeks. Every snide comment at pickup, every exclusionary text chain she'd been left off of, every mock-concerned observation about proper childcare standards, every whispered joke about the help thinking she belonged. Min-ji had suggested it after the 3rd week of incidents. "Document everything," she had advised. "You never know when it might matter." And Ava, who'd survived enough workplace discrimination to know the value of evidence, had followed that advice meticulously. The recording from the fundraiser was particularly damning. Aaliyah's voice, crystal clear, making her disdain obvious. The laughter from other parents, the casual cruelty delivered with champagne glass confidence. But that was just the beginning. Because Min-ji wasn't just Junho's executive assistant, she was his intelligence officer. And she'd been building a file on every parent who'd shown Ava hostility. The file on Aaliyah Ashford was particularly interesting. If you're still with me, I want to hear from you. Comment below and tell me what you think is going to happen next. And if you're loving this story, smash that like button and subscribe to Love and Tension for more amazing content. 3 days after the fundraiser, Ava met with Min-ji in Junho's office. "I need your permission," Min-ji said without preamble, pulling up a laptop. "What I'm about to show you is information we've gathered on several parents who've been problematic." "That sounds ominous." "It's thorough." Min-ji's expression was neutral. "Mr. Park doesn't tolerate threats to people under his protection. The behavior toward you has been noted, but he won't act without your consent." She turned the laptop screen toward Ava. "Aaliyah Ashford, age 38, married to Marcus Ashford for 12 years, president of the Riverside Academy Parent Association, board member of 3 charitable foundations." Min-ji clicked through screens. "Also, running an unregistered daycare service from her home, charging premium rates while using unlicensed caregivers. Tax fraud on approximately $150,000 in unreported income over 3 years. Multiple complaints to the licensing board that were suppressed through personal connections." Ava's eyes widened. "She's been mocking me for childcare standards while running an illegal daycare? The irony is remarkable," Min-ji agreed, "but it gets better." More screens. Marcus Ashford's company, Ashford Tech Solutions, has been systematically underreporting earnings to avoid taxes. Their cryptocurrency platform facilitated money laundering for at least 6 criminal organizations, inadvertently, we believe, but their negligence is prosecutable. They've also been violating labor laws, classifying full-time employees as contractors to avoid paying benefits. "How did you get all this?" Min-ji smiled slightly. "Mr. Park's businesses operate in various sectors. We have access to information that most people don't, and we're very good at connecting dots." She showed Aaliyah more files. Jessica Hartford, one of Aaliyah's closest friends and most vocal supporters of Ava's exclusion, embezzling from her own children's college fund to support a gambling addiction. 3 offshore accounts her husband didn't know about.
Brandon Chen, who'd loudly questioned Ava's background check status, currently being investigated by his company's HR for sexual harassment complaints from 4 different employees. Christine Morrison, who organized the group text chains that excluded Ava, plagiarized her master's thesis, a fact that several professors at her alma mater had recently been made aware of. This is... Ava couldn't find words. Comprehensive, Minji finished. Mr. Park's philosophy is simple. People who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. People who've thrown stones at you have very fragile houses. The question is whether you want those houses to shatter. Ava stared at the screen. All this information, all this leverage, all this potential destruction. What are my options? Option 1, we do nothing. You've been vindicated publicly at the fundraiser. Junho made his position clear. Many parents will recalibrate their behavior. And option 2, Minji's expression didn't change. We expose everything. Not directly, that would be crude, but information finds its way to appropriate authorities. Tax agencies, licensing boards, company HR departments, university ethics committees, the press where relevant. You're talking about destroying these people's lives. I'm talking about consequences for choices they made. Minji closed the laptop. They chose to target someone who worked hard, acted with integrity, and protected a child in danger. They chose cruelty over kindness. They chose to mock your background while hiding their own hypocrisy. This isn't destruction, Ms. Brooke. It's accountability. Ava stood, walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. The city spread below, all lights and movement and intersecting lives. If I say yes to this, I'm becoming like them, using power to hurt people. No, Minji said quietly. They hurt you for entertainment, for social positioning, for ego. You would be revealing truths that protect others from their behavior. Aaliyah's unlicensed daycare put children at risk. Marcus's platform facilitated actual crimes. These aren't innocent people being persecuted. They're people who've been getting away with things because they had the right connections and enough money to avoid scrutiny. Ava turned back. And if I say no, then we don't act. Your choice matters here. The weight of it settled over Ava like a physical thing. The power to reshape lives. The responsibility that came with Junho's protection. I need to think about it. Of course, Minji stood. Take whatever time you need, but know this. These people will continue their behavior if there are no consequences. Not just toward you, but toward anyone else they perceive as beneath them. Power unchecked becomes cruelty. You have an opportunity to check it. She left Ava alone in the office. The city spread below, a decision waiting. Ava decided at 3 a.m., lying awake in the comfortable apartment that Junho owned, thinking about all the times she'd been powerless, all the times she'd smiled through discrimination, swallowed her pride, accepted that the world was unfair and survival meant endurance, not justice. But she also thought about Jiho, about teaching him through her actions what it meant to stand up for yourself, to set boundaries, to understand that kindness didn't mean accepting abuse. She called Minji at 7 a.m. Option 2, Ava said, but with conditions. Only expose information that protects others or corrects genuine injustice. Nothing petty, nothing cruel. I don't want revenge. I want accountability. Understood. And I want it done quietly. No headlines, no public humiliation, just appropriate authorities receiving appropriate information. That's actually more effective, Minji said. Public destruction creates martyrs. Quiet collapse creates cautionary tales. The unraveling took 2 weeks. IRS received detailed documentation of the Ashfords' tax issues, anonymous, comprehensive, impossible to ignore. The state licensing board received complaints about Aaliyah's illegal daycare, complete with parent testimonials, photos, and financial records. Marcus's company board received the SEC investigation documentation their compliance department had somehow missed. Jessica Hartford's husband received information about the offshore accounts from a concerned friend. Brandon Chen's HR department received formal complaints that they could no longer bury. Christine Morrison's university received plagiarism evidence that triggered a formal investigation. None of it traced back to Junho or Ava. All of it appeared to come from unrelated sources, dots that various authorities connected independently. But the results were systematic and devastating. The Ashfords faced IRS audits that would take years and cost hundreds of thousands in penalties and legal fees. Aaliyah's childcare service was shut down, with possible criminal charges pending. Marcus's company underwent emergency board investigation, and he was suspended pending outcomes. Their social invitations dried up overnight, not because people knew they'd targeted Ava, but because association with people under investigation was risky. Jessica's divorce was filed within a week. Brandon's company quietly let him go, settling with complainants to avoid publicity. Christine's thesis was revoked, her master's degree under review, her PhD aspirations destroyed. At Riverside Academy, the shift was remarkable. Parents who'd ignored Ava now offered friendly waves. Some even approached with apologetic smiles, sudden interest in conversation. Aaliyah Ashford didn't attend pickup anymore. Word was that she'd withdrawn her children, citing family circumstances. Ava watched it all with complicated feelings. Not triumph, not joy, just a quiet certainty that she'd chosen the harder right thing over the easier wrong thing. "Do you regret it?" Junho asked one evening as they reviewed Jiho's schedule over tea in his penthouse. Ava considered the question carefully. "I regret that it was necessary. I don't regret doing it." "A good answer." Junho poured more tea. "Power requires wisdom, Miss Brooke. You've shown both. I had help. You had resources. You provided the judgment to use them appropriately." He met her eyes. "That's why you're here." Jiho ran into the room waving a drawing. "Miss Ava, look, I drew the T-Rex we talked about." Ava smiled, the complicated weight of adult decisions lifting for a moment. "That's magnificent. Is that his baby there?" "Yes, because even scary dinosaurs protect their families." From the mouths of children. 6 months after the fundraiser, Ava attended Jiho's piano recital at Riverside Academy. She sat in the audience beside Junho, wearing a dress that fit perfectly because she'd finally agreed to let Sujin take her to proper fittings. Her hair was styled professionally. She carried herself with quiet confidence. Not because of the clothes, not because of the money, because she'd learned something essential. Dignity wasn't granted by others. It was claimed by yourself. When Jiho finished his piece, a surprisingly complex Mozart sonata, the audience applauded. He bowed, then looked directly at Jiho and his father, his smile radiant. "He's gotten so much better," the woman beside Ava whispered. New parent, didn't know the history. "He practices every day. He's determined." "You're his guardian, right? I've heard wonderful things." Ava smiled. "I'm his friend who keeps him safe. That's the important part." After the recital, parents mingled in the lobby. Several approached Junho with congratulations. A few nodded respectfully to Ava. Aaliyah Ashford wasn't there. Neither were several other former social queens who'd found their kingdoms suddenly less secure. But there were new faces, kinder faces, parents who judged on character rather than class, who'd noticed how the hierarchy had shifted and chose the better side of it. As they walked to the car, Jiho between them holding both their hands, Jiho asked, "Miss Ava, are you happy?" "I am," Ava said, surprised to find it completely true. "Good. Appa says you saved me, so I want you to be happy." "You both saved me, too," Ava said quietly, in different ways. Junho caught her eye over Jiho's head. Something passed between them. Understanding, perhaps. Respect. The acknowledgement of two people who'd started as strangers in a crisis and built something neither expected. Not quite family, not quite friendship. Something entirely their own. That night, alone in her apartment, which still belonged to Junho, which she'd accepted as part of the package, Ava checked her phone. The recording from the fundraiser was still saved. She'd never posted it publicly, never needed to. The threat of exposure had been enough, combined with the quiet accountability that followed. She deleted it. Some weapons were most powerful when they remained holstered.
Her life now was unrecognizable from the one she'd lived 8 months ago. Different apartment building. Junho had moved her to a nicer complex, still owned by Junho, still controlled. Different car, different wardrobe, different daily routine, different purpose. But the same core: protecting children, acting with integrity, choosing the harder right thing. She'd been laughed at, mocked, dismissed as unworthy, and she'd won not by being loudest, but by being right. Not by demanding respect, but by earning it. Not by destroying her enemies, but by exposing truths that needed light. Ava Brooke had walked into an alley on a rainy night and found a scared child. And in saving him, she'd saved herself. Not from poverty, though that burden had lifted. Not from struggle, though her life was easier now, but from the quiet despair of believing that kindness was weakness, that integrity was vulnerability, that standing up for yourself meant becoming cruel. She'd learned that power could be wielded with wisdom, that accountability wasn't vengeance, that sometimes the best revenge wasn't destruction, but living well, standing tall, and never apologizing for being exactly who you are. Ava Brooke had walked into an alley